Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first spring workshop, Research Workshop 6. My name is Professor Ashley Arrington. I'm going to walk you through our video today. I hope you'll forgive my voice. I have been very much under the weather as we start the spring semester. So today we'll focus on first our research refresher, reviewing our 4-step process that we looked at in the fall. And then secondly, we'll talk about advanced searching and do an introduction into advanced search techniques. So first, as you'll recall, we looked at our 4-step process throughout the fall semester. We went through each step respectively. So if you'll recall, we looked at step 1 first, our issue analysis, where we're preparing ourselves for the research process, finding out what particular issue or question we're looking at, right? What area of law are we working within? We talked about the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why, as a helpful tool for walking through that. So who are the parties, right? What is the relationship between those parties? What's the legal relationship between them? What is going on here, right? What is the legal issue at play? When did this happen, right? Is statute of limitations an issue, right? Looking at the timing. Fourth, where, right? Jurisdiction. Are we in a federal or state jurisdiction, right? Are there multiple jurisdictions at issue? And then why, right? Why do we care? How are we going to seek to be of benefit to our client, right? What are we going to look to do in terms of relief? What are the potential claims that we could pursue? And what are the types of relief that may be possible for us to advocate on behalf of our client? So, why are we, we were preparing ourselves for our research process during step 1, right? Then we moved to step 2. We're looking at secondary sources. So we're looking to a number of the things that we've talked about. We've talked about legal encyclopedias. We've talked about popular practice aids. So for encyclopedias, you might look to American jurisprudence or Texas jurisprudence to get a broad overview of the legal issue. Before you dig further, practice aids, we've talked about O'Connor's, Torsanios, depending on what you have access to, right? Some of these sources are coming from Lexis, some are coming from Westlaw. So using the sources in order to gain familiarity with the area and issue of law, and then point us to relevant primary law, right? So step 3 is seeking out relevant codified law, right? So looking at relevant statutes or regulations, court rules, right? Various types of codified law. Is there codified law on point? We want to know that before we start looking to case law, right? Our step 4, how does that case law interpret the codified law that's on point, right? We want to know about that codified law first before we start to look at the case law that interprets that codified law, right? So, moving into our search methods for both codified law and case law, we talked about several different methods for each of these. With respect to codified law, again, that would be your statutes, your regulations, your court rules, etc. So we talked about known citation, right? So that's great. If you have a known citation, you know which statute or regulation you're going directly to. That is not always going to be the case, right? You may want to look to the table of contents. We've talked about the value of these basic finding tools. So, looking to the statutory rules and digging through the table of contents to look at the language used, where specifically might the relevant statute or regulation be, right? We talked about using the index. I think we talked about, as an example, we looked at divorce. We found that some states, I'm trying to remember what the alternative phrase was for divorce, and I can't seem to recall. Termination of marriage, something along those lines. But we would only find that if we could have gone to the index first, right? Looked for a dissolution of marriage. That's what it was. So you could start with D for divorce, and then the index would point you there, right? That would be helpful to you because you didn't initially know that you're looking for dissolution of marriage rather than divorce, right? Popular name table. We talked about, we know ACA for Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. We didn't know the full Affordable Care Act and Patient Protection Act. Can't remember the exact acronym, right? But if we went to Obamacare or Affordable Care Act, those short forms, we would be pointed to the relevant statutory act, right? And then advanced searching. So there's a reason why we've focused on these basic finding tools as beginning researchers, right? We want to use the tools that are available to us as we familiarize ourselves with this language, with the way that the law is laid out in terms of the statutory structure of an act. Advanced searching, we'll talk about a little bit more today in terms of natural language searching, as well as terms and connectors, or what is known as Boolean searching. So those were our methods for codified law. Now for case law, right, we talked about how to seek out mandatory law or persuasive case law. We talked about when is law mandatory, right? We talked about it being within our jurisdiction. We talked about it with being at the same level of court or higher, right? We also want to know, we also want to look to other things like date, right? Is this directly on point for our issue? We want to use mandatory case law when we can find it, right? But there are other times when we may need to use some persuasive case law in order to further bolster our argument. Or perhaps we haven't found any mandatory case law on point, and so we need to use persuasive case law to build our argument. But we talked about several methods for that, right? Known citation. Again, that's not likely going to be the case. Maybe you've done your research already and you're coming back to a known citation and you can just plug that in and go directly to that case. Perhaps your supervisor tells you this is the case of interest. Again, that's not likely going to be the case in practice. That's going to be the rare instance, whereas you're really going to be working from that third example, right, using the one good case method. We talked about finding one good case and then using these indexing tools that these research attorneys and attorney editors from Lexis and Westlaw have put so much time into classifying different areas and issues of law that will speed up our research and help us tremendously with respect to being more effective and efficient legal researchers. So we talked about that, and then again, we listed advanced searching, but we didn't dig too far into that. right? We're going to dig further into that today. As I mentioned, both natural language and terms and connectors or Boolean searching. But first, let's think about some of those indexing tools, those citator tools, right? What is a citator? We talked about citators and their multiple purposes, right? So we talked about citators being the foundation for these indexing systems. So when we see that tab up top, that line of tabs, whether we're looking at Westlaw or Lexis, we're seeing citing references, other citing sources, citing decisions, table of authorities, right? So that's looking at the cases that are, or other sources that our case relies on when we're thinking about table of authorities, when we're thinking about citing references or citing decisions or other citing sources. We're looking at sources that the case that we are looking at is citing to, right? Those are helpful sources that we can dig further into. History, we talked about the history tab, right? All of these different tabs are part of that citator or indexing system that are going to be incredibly helpful for our research process. We talked about topics and key numbers, right? We talked about just general topics and saw that our topics get more and more specific, moving into subtopics and subtopics, if you will, right? We saw that both on Westlaw and Lexis. The key number system, same thing, right? Another indexing system where key numbers are being assigned to various issues of law, areas, points of law, right? They can be generalized and then get more and more specific as well. But we did note that the key numbers are specific to Westlaw, right? That's a Westlaw classification system. Whereas topics you will find on both Westlaw and Lexis. We talked about headnotes. Those are both on Lexis and Westlaw. So what are they? Remember, these are summarizations of points of law that are being discussed within the case that we're looking at. So just a very brief summarization so that we can look to the top of a case and say, oh, these are some of the issues and points of law that are being discussed within this case, right? And then we can use that head note to get to other cases that are specific to that same issue of law that's being summarized. Now, if you'll recall, we said that head notes sit at the top of the case, but they are created and drafted by attorney editors, and nowadays they're starting to be drafted by AI tools. So they are not a part of the case. They are a tool to help you with your research. They should not be cited, right? You can follow them to get to other official sources that you could cite, but you will not cite a head note, right? So why are you using these things? So again, these are all indexing tools, right? Regardless of whether you're using any of those citator tabs throughout that top search line that you see on Westlaw and Lexis. Whether you're following a topic or a key number or a head note, right? They are all indexing tools that you can use to get to other relevant sources, other relevant pieces of law, other relevant cases that are similar to what you're looking at. Okay, so these are the types of tools that you want to be familiarizing yourself with as a new legal researcher. and getting a feel for using these tools to walk you through research, right? Because you're not, as a new researcher, it's going to be difficult for you to be thinking about how to classify these different topics and areas of law on your own, right? These tools have done that work for you, and they are there for you to take advantage of. So we've focused on those one good case methods, right? We take one good case, all we need is one good case, and we work from that case to get to other relevant cases using any of those citator tools. Headnotes, key numbers, topics, whatever it is, right? Citing references, table of authorities. So many tools at our disposal. Now we're going to start looking at advanced keyword searching. But again, there's a reason why we've waited for this, right? You want to start with those citator tools. You want to start with the tools working from that one good case rather than just jumping into that top search bar and typing in a keyword natural language search as you do in Google, right? You can do that, but these indexing tools are going to be more valuable in most instances. So when might you use natural language, right? As we said, that's what you're familiar with using in Google, just throwing in a basic string of words. So that's your everyday language, right? You're using that when you want an overview of a topic, right? You don't know what the official legal terminology is. So you're using that natural language to get a feel for what that legal terminology could be. Or maybe you have done some terms and connectors results and you're just getting too few results. You're using terms and connectors is just too narrow, right? So because of that, you are moving to a natural language search, which is going to be broader and yield more results than that terms and connectors search would. With our terms and connectors searching, what is also known as Boolean searching, that's when we are in control of the algorithm, right? We are using specific syntax and connectors to build search queries. But we have to have an understanding of how these queries are being read and processed by the databases that we're using, right? So we can use connectors to search for particular word patterns, alternative words, right? Using our truncation at the end of a word, so we're seeing multiple different forms of a word, proximities between words, so we can search within 3 words of one word from the next word, within the same sentence, or within the same paragraph, right? We can search specific parts of a document, title, or author, or judge, right? So these terms and connectors are most helpful for when you're searching within a document. But again, you need that familiarity with the connectors for each platform. With Westlaw and Lexis, they are very similar across the 2 platforms, but there are important differences that are going to matter when you're asking the database to process a query that you've entered into either one of those databases. So what we see here are very basic connectors, right? We've got our and or not. Those are things that you're familiar with already, right? So, and you're looking for both terms, or you're looking for A or B, right? Not, you're looking for one, but not the other, right? So those are the easy ones. But now we're starting to gain familiarity with some of these more specific connectors. They're common connectors when it comes to legal research databases, but you may not have seen them in the past, right? So again, we said you could search within paragraph or sentence. You could specify 3 words or 12 words, whatever it is. You could use a wildcard if there's a word so advisor is a good example. You could use that wildcard where that E stands or where that O stands, and then you're picking up the word advisor where it's spelled with an O, where it's spelled with an E. You're using quotation marks for precise phrases, right? Now we've got our reminders on both Westlaw and Lexis. So on Westlaw, under your main search bar from the main page, you see your advanced search link. You click there, these search tips will come up, right? You can look to the left tab. You just click on Boolean terms and connectors, and you see your list, right? And this is helpful to you as you start to learn what these connectors are on this specific platform. With respect to Lexis, you're doing the same thing, right? From the main page, you're clicking on advanced search, and then you're seeing these connectors. It will point you to additional help links so you can read about further search connector information. So it'll tell you the order in which these terms and connectors are processed, right? You also want to have an understanding of how and when they're processed, right? And that can vary by database as well. And part of this is a large part of this is just practice, right? It's just practicing and getting a feel for how these queries are read on each database. Lexis, Westlaw. If you have access to other databases in practice, those may be different too, but you're going to want to know how they are being processed. There's some helpful links here too, right? You can follow these search connectors and then how to search with Boolean terms and connectors link. That may be helpful to you. What are the limitations for using keyword searching or Boolean terms and connector searching? So for keyword searching, that's really broad, right? So we might get a lot of results that aren't really all that relevant. But if it's too narrow, we're missing important terms or phrases. We're going to need to do more weeding, right? Because it is too very likely broad, we're going to have to go through and use more filters than we would if we had just used a more specific search query. When we don't know what the important terms or phrases are, it's not necessarily all that helpful because then we're missing those, right? But on the other hand, you might search a keyword search and have broad language that points you to legal terminology. So it really just depends, right? Again, trial and error, practice. Boolean terms and connectors, right? That effectiveness depends on you. It depends on your understanding of the database, of the connectors that are used in the database, of the order in which those queries are processed. And so if you have an incorrect understanding of those things, you're not going to get effective results, right? Simple queries don't necessarily work well. You want to use these connectors when you have a better understanding of those terms and how they relate to each other. Complex queries can be difficult, right? You need to think about how many words within. Are you going to see those words within the same sentence or paragraph? If you're doing sentence rather than paragraph, maybe you're missing some important results, right? And then, as I've said many times, these do vary by database and can be difficult to recall, but we just looked at where to find those reminders, right? And we're going to do that multiple times over as new legal researchers and as we're learning what these connectors are. So, in terms of our in-class exercise, let's just ask ourselves, we'll look at this prompt and ask ourselves, what are some of the terms or phrases that stand out? So our hypo says, you represent a small business with 200 employees. The head of human resources has been informed that one of the employees is addicted to Fetty, commercially known as fentanyl. She has come to you to find out if her company needs to provide any special accommodations for this employee under state or federal law. Okay, so looking at this, what are some of the terms that stand out to you that you might use in a search query? Maybe you've highlighted employees, right? We're dealing with employment law here. Human resources. Addicted. We're dealing with addiction. Fetty or fentanyl, right? Those stand out. Special accommodations. That's a legal issue we're looking at, right? So ask yourself, did you identify these things? Which of these are essential? Which of these might be too specific? Is Fetty or fentanyl too specific? For example, what synonyms do we want to use? Right? How might these words be connected? And that's when we start thinking about what connectors should we use, right? What other terms that are similar to these terms, synonyms, or similar phrases can we use? How will we use these terms to broaden or narrow our searches, right? So now let's start to think about putting some of these together, okay? So some examples here. These are not exhaustive, right? These are just some examples. So we looked at Fetty or fentanyl. Is that too specific, right? Maybe we need to use substance or drug or opioid. And we want to look for each of those, right? Maybe if we don't use those together, we're missing some important results if we were to just use drug or just use opioid. We want to use substance as well. Addiction, abuse, human resources, we looked at employee, and then we have our truncation so that we're picking up also employment, employee, employer, special accommodations. We want that in phrases, in quotations, because that's a specific phrase that we'll see. ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. In some documents, it may be listed as ADA. In others, it's listed as Americans with Disabilities Act. We want to pull up both of those things, right? So let's ask ourselves, which of these are essential? Have we considered potential synonyms, right? Do we miss certain terms? Are some of these too specific? Like we said, Fetty or fentanyl. If we use that and not drug or opioid or substance, we are likely missing a host of relevant results, right? What connectors are we using? And, or. We've got mostly ors here. Are we missing connectors that might be helpful? What are some of the more specific keywords and phrases? Right? So ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act, we didn't see that in our prompt, but it's something that has been triggered. We're looking at the hypothetical and thinking, oh, this might be an ADA issue. And so now we know to perhaps use that in some of our initial queries. Okay, so then we start to think about, how are these connected, right? How are we using these connectors to search for these terms and phrases, or within each other, right? What is the relationship between them, right? We've got within 3 words, right? So here we've specified substance or drug within 3 words of addiction or abuse, right? So substance or drug, we're seeing the parenthetical there. So we know that substance or drug is being read together. We know that addiction or abuse is being read together. And then employ, or accommodation is being read on its own, right? We also can see that substance or drug is being read within 3 words of addiction or abuse. We want the database to look for substance or drug within 3 words of addiction or abuse, and we want to see the employee or employment or employee, and we want to see accommodation, right? So what types of results could we retrieve here? Right? Could it be substance abuse? Could it be drug addiction? Could it be employment accommodations? Right? What have we missed? Do we need to expand? Do we need within the same sentence, within 10 words rather than within 3 words, right? And this is trial and error. Again, we put this in as an initial query, and then we run a new search and we see, okay, how many results have I gotten here? If I'm getting 10,000 results, that's all the results that the database is going to retrieve. So that's too many, right? So then we need to go in and we need to make our query more specific. Change some of those connectors rather than and, maybe use within the same sentence, right? Again, this slide is not meant to be perfect or exhaustive, right? It's just an example of something that you could use and work from. Now you'll also note when you click on Advanced Search from the main page, it will take you to this tool where you can start to build a search query using the tool at left. So you can ask you type in, you see find documents that have, you see all of these terms or any of these terms. So we typed in employ and accommodations. We see in the top search bar now that we want both of those terms, right? We see on Westlaw that the space is processing the space between drug or fentanyl or opioid. It is or, right? It is being processed as or. Whereas on Lexis, the space is being processed as and, right? That's hugely important. That is a hugely important difference that you want to be aware of, right? But what's helpful about this tool is you can use these lower search bars to type in those words, and then you look to see how it builds that query in the top search bar, right? So that's just a tool that you can use to familiarize yourself as you begin to learn how to build these queries on your own. looking at a search tree on Lexis. So you can see our search query at top. What's shown here is fentanyl within the same sentence as employ or employ and accommodations together, right? So now you can start to see how the database is reading this query. So when it looks at drug or opioid or fentanyl, those together give us 10,000 results. That's not specific enough. That's not narrow enough for us, right? When it reads employ and accommodations, same thing there. We're getting 10,000 results. But when we use that within the same sentence, you see that at the bottom, we're looking for drug or fentanyl or opioid within the same sentence as employment and accommodations, or employee or employer and accommodations, right? We see that connector has narrowed our terms down to only 504 results. So we see what's helping make our query more narrow, and then asking ourselves, is that effective? Are we missing results? Is this too narrow, right? Again, if you're saying 10,000, that's too broad. You need to get more specific. But you also don't want to get too specific, right? You don't want to miss important results either. So you might use a search tree in helping you to understand how these queries are read as well. Again, we've talked about the value of research guides, not just from Texas Tech, but we do have a whole host of research guides that will be helpful to you. So you can click on this link. You can get to this from the main law library page, following the research guides link. We've got this research guide that is specifically drafted on terms and connectors, and you can see at left there's tabs on each of the different databases, so you can see what those connectors are on each database. How are they read by each respective database, right? You'll want to focus on Westlaw and Lexis for now, but as you move into 3L or 2L and 3L, you might want to start looking more at Bloomberg or Fastcase or Casetext, right? You might also just run a Google search. Research guide, terms and connectors, library guide, Boolean searching, and you'll see other law library guides that will help you with terms and connectors searching, right? Super easy. Just a Google search, and you'll have a whole host of resources available to you. Finally, I want to highlight that as in your spring semester, you've got through your first semester of law school, so many congratulations. So now, as it is the spring semester, you are now eligible to begin pursuing our voluntary online Excellence in Legal Research program. I encourage you to do that. We do have a special session that is specific to advanced searching and looks at Boolean terms and connectors searching, as well as natural language searching, right? Not only how to put those together, but understanding the advantages and disadvantages of each. How do you design them effectively, right? How do you conduct proximity searches effectively? How do you review those results and revise those queries effectively, right? So it's just another opportunity for practice. Again, I encourage you to sign up. You can follow this QR code here and register and start taking those classes on your own time whenever you like. We also just started a new $1,500 bar prep incentive. So if you complete the ELR program by the time you graduate, you will be entered into a drawing for $1,500 toward your bar prep course, and that can be any bar prep course that you want. You will choose the bar prep course, and then we'll put $1,500 toward that bar prep course. So, and then once you do your first class, you will also be entered into a drawing for a gift card for Target or Amazon or Starbucks. So if you have questions about that, reach out to me, please. Ashley.arrington at ttu.edu. I am head of instruction, and I head the Excellence in Legal Research program, so I can answer any questions that you have about that. So, as I said, questions, email me, whether about this lecture today or about the ELR program or about the final assessment. I'm happy to help. We are also available to answer your questions by way of a number of platforms. So you can catch us in person, come to the law library, ask for a research librarian Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. Email us here, reference.law@ttu.edu, or email us individually. Call us, and you can also get to our chat box from the main law library webpage. It will pop up in the bottom right hand corner when you move to the main law library website, or really any page on the law library website. At the bottom right hand corner, this will pop up, and you can chat with us during those business hours, our regular research hours, 8:30 to 4:30. If it's outside of those hours, we will get back to you. Okay, so thank you. I hope the review has been helpful. We will continue to build on our 4-step process, and now we're starting to think about these new advanced search techniques with natural language and Boolean terms and connector searching. But this is all new. Lots of practice, lots of trial and error to come. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to continuing to work with you throughout the remainder of the spring semester. Thank you again. Bye-bye.